Hello, and this is our presentation related to impact of artificial intelligence on students' life, a paper prepared by Jesus Ravelo and Nikita Strogalev. It's me. It's team number 10.
So for our presentation structure, we're going to start off with an abstract, moving along to an introduction, related works, our research methodology, the results that we came down to, future work discussion / conclusion, and our references.
So, starting from abstract, over the past decade, artificial intelligence has slowly but surely found its way out into almost every corner of our educational system, forever changing how we learn and interact with information. This paper looks into how AI is transforming students' everyday academic life, from getting quick answers to challenging questions to receiving personalized support unique to their learning styles. We focus on AI-powered chatbots. Those tools not only offer round-the-clock academic help, but also help students with administrative tasks like figuring out class schedules or financial aid information. By reviewing various studies, we see that AI often leads to better engagement and improved learning outcomes. However, it's not all smooth sailing. Some students struggle to adapt, and concerns about privacy, technology dependence, and uneven playing fields for those with less tech knowledge remain real issues. In this study, we use surveys and data analysis to capture students' thoughts about AI in the day-to-day studies. Our findings suggest that while AI holds a lot of promise for making education more accessible and effective, we need to be careful and thoughtful about how we roll into it and what can we benefit.
So for our introduction, in this study, we aim to investigate the significant influence that AI has on students and their lives by examining the potential for improving the learning experience and also the challenges across the different educational settings. And so in this paper, we're approaching the topic through a means of quantitative and qualitative methods. So for quantitative methods, we're going to apply statistical analysis that we use on a survey that we put together and gather data on ourselves. And so with these descriptive statistics and t-tests, we'll be able to identify any patterns in the students' familiarity with AI and any concerns that they might have. And so for the qualitative insights, we're looking for more thematic and sentiment analysis to kind of see what kinds of responses we're getting in those open-ended questions. And so by using these methods, we're wanting to tell a story, right? To provide a well-rounded view of how AI is shaping students' learning experiences. And so in our research, we of course went through our related works and the references that we included into this document. And so here are just a few that we're using. They're really impactful in how we looked at our research, because you would just assume that the impact of AI is pretty positive, but there's a lot, right, that we need to look at. And so these different articles that we found and used in our survey and research are those that are here. And so, for example, personalized learning, using chatbots to improve goal setting in online courses, so like this one, or even AI and administrative support, where students have the ability to do those administrative tasks that they would be doing on campus with someone themselves, without having to interact, or just being able to do that yourself and not really worry about the consequences of not knowing how to do things. Another good example is AI for support, and using that in real time to provide like an automated conversation. Coming over to the next one, we have also program advisement that helps with assisting with a college program for students who need that advisement of what degree should I get into? What courses do I need to be taking? This kind of work with AI can help us with making that easier. And so, in our comparison, we're going to use machine learning, qualitative statistics, particularly with thematic and sentiment analysis, to validate if our survey results are in line with the overall sentiment of positivity and highly influential impact of AI in education from the sources that we've collected in this study, which you've seen just now.
So for the research and the methodology, to investigate the impact of AI on students' lives and understand the perception of AI integration in education, we propose a quantitative survey study at East Texas A&M University. The survey aims to gather data on students' views regarding the use of AI in classroom, accessing both the perceived benefits and concerns. This section outlines the methodology including survey design, participant selection, data collection procedures, and analysis methods. So for the survey design, we'll utilize a structured questionnaire that includes both closed-ended and open-ended questions, ensuring a balance between standardized data, like just answer true or false and so on, or open-ended questions that we will we'll talk about later. And
so with the survey design, really what we're trying to do is like grab for whoever is taking that survey, what is the awareness and what is the level of usage that you have with those tools, and also what are your perceptions of that? Does it seem positive? Is it neutral? Is it negative? And so with the survey, we're hoping that, with the questions that we're asking, we'll be able to do that analysis. And so these are the questions that we had selected. We created or administered this survey through Microsoft Forms. And the questions that we had were looking at 4 different areas, right? Awareness and usage, perceived benefits, concerns and challenges, and overall perception. The majority of these questions, I believe it was 6, were at the Likert scale. So you would respond, as from a scale of 1 to 5, how familiar are you, or how positive, or it's that scale from 1 to 5 type question. The rest a couple were true or false, and we had a couple also that were open-ended questions. And so this was really interesting to implement in our code. What we did is we used machine learning in a Jupyter environment using Python. And so grabbing these Likert scale questions and assigning a weight, and having essentially our code decipher this column to go from actual text to like a word count, or not a word count, like a numerical value to give it a weight, is pretty interesting, and that's something we had kind of some fun doing. But for the data analysis, I'm not sure.
Quantitative data from closed-ended questions will be analyzed using machine learning, using descriptive statistics to summarize the data, and inferential statistics to identify the perceived outlook students have with AI in education. To avoid issues like data dredging, a statistics method will be selected based on the research questions and hypotheses established during the study design. So here's a figure of how we're gonna do the data analysis. Essentially, we'll use descriptive statistics, inferential statistics, reliability testing, thematic analysis, and content analysis.
Yeah, and that'll help us get like a feel for, I guess, these specific questions. And I'm sorry, we actually didn't go through the questions themselves. We just kind of went over the categories. So the first question, and these are in the order that the user would accept a survey, and this is how they would be presented to them. Yeah. So starting with, how familiar are you with AI technologies in education?
And the second one is, how you used AI tools in your academic activity? Have you ever used them? So like yes or no.
Mm-hmm. And just like a follow-up question is, how frequent, right? Is it daily, weekly, monthly, rarely? So these top 3 questions, there's 2 Likert and 1 true false from the awareness and usage.
Yeah, in next stage we have first question, which is To what extent do you agree with that AI enhances personalized learning experience? That's like Likert scale from 1 to 5, where 5 is it very enhances the learning experience.
Yeah, and the next question is, do you believe AI tools help improve academic performance? That was also a Likert scale. And what are the main advantages of using AI in education? And that was one of those open-ended questions. So question number 6 we used a lot in our survey to do the thematic analysis, because that's where we got most of that data from, was from question 6, right? Since it's one where you are given an open response and you can go ahead and input that yourself. So that's where a lot of our analysis went for the open-ended question.
Then next topic, and question number 7, what concerns do you have about AI in education? That's multiple choice. We had privacy issues, over-reliance on technology, and lack of human interaction. And you could also choose other if you have something else on your mind.
And then also, do you feel that AI could widen the gap between students with different levels of technological literacy? Meaning those students who aren't as technical or don't have as much exposure to, what's new in technology, would they be, falling behind from those who do? Who are more, up to date with these kinds of changes, and that's kind of what we're trying to grasp with that question there.
Yeah, and the last 2 questions are for overall perception. Number 9 is, on scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate the overall impact of AI on your educational experience? Where 1 is very negative and 5 is very positive. So. And number 10 is, would you recommend increasing integration of AI tools in your courses? Which is true or false?
Yeah, so like a yes, no. So that one was really interesting to see, because I would have expected to see a lot of yeses, but we saw also a lot of no's. So it's interesting. But we are skipping through the data analysis because we went through that just now. Again, this is a little bit of what we already touched about, using quantitative data analysis to do descriptive statistics, inferential statistics, and reliability testing, and then moving on to do qualitative data analysis for thematic analysis and content analysis. Something I want to touch on that we didn't really talk a lot about was the reliability testing, and that's using Chromebox Alpha. And this is just to see the internal consistency of survey items. So we did do that, and also the content analysis. So for word clouds, really interesting to see what is used the most for that open-ended question. So we found that was pretty interesting. So jumping into the descriptive statistics, we use this to summarize and describe the main features of the data set. And so this provides like a simple summary of the visualizations about the sample and the measures for our survey. And so it's going to give us calculate the measures, like the mean or the average and the standard deviation or the spread of each point. So the mean is going to represent the average response for each survey question, and then the standard deviation is going to indicate the variability of spread for each response. And so here's an example of what that output looks like. At the bottom, you'll notice there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 questions that show up, and that's because those are those 6 Likert scale questions that we have. And so we'll go through the results for each of those. Here we see question 1, 3, and 4. And so we, again, did this using our Jupyter Notebook in Python.
Yeah, machine learning.
Yep. And so we're taking the AI class now, and so using that, what we've learned to here, it's been pretty beneficial. But yeah, this kind of goes to show us how those responses are spread out for each of these questions. Moving on to the next 3. Also, you can see how the trend goes. You'll see from 1 to 5 is indicating,
Likert scale.
Yeah, Likert scale.
From
5
1 to
being
5.
the max and 1 being the lowest. So it's a little bit harder to tell here because the questions aren't on here. But question 5, if we scrolled far enough, we could see what question is question 5 on the. Scroll up. where it shows the questions listed.
Yeah.
There. So, for example, here, sorry about that. Question 5, what are your main advantages of using AI in education? Oh, sorry, no. Do you believe AI tools help improve academic performance? And so we can see that in general, the majority of our responses are falling on that 4 or 5 mark. So the mean here is 3.79, averaging at a 4, which would give us that, what would that be?
Like
somewhat familiar, not extremely familiar, but somewhat, yeah. And then next we have our 2 true or false questions, and the same analysis done there, and it kind of gives us that count. Given those true or false responses, we can kind of see the spread of those of the yeses and nos for those true or false questions.
Yeah, question number 10 is pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's that last one I'm telling you, where you start to see what was that last question?
Would you recommend increasing integration of AI tools in your courses?
Yeah, you see more no's than yes, which is interesting because a lot of these responses up here are still, they're agreeing or they are familiar. They do agree with the use of AI intelligence. Yeah, they do use it, but they don't recommend it more, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Right.
So inferential statistics. In our research, we use inferential statistics to make conclusion about the survey data by comparing group means, using t-test or ANOVA, exploring relationship between variables, using Pearson or Spearman correlations, and predicting outcomes through regression analysis. We also perform assumption check, such as normality and homogeneity, to ensure the validity of the statistical test applied. This allows us to identify significant patterns and a relationship regarding participants' attitudes towards AI in education.
And this is kind of some stuff we've already talked about too, the comparative analysis, correlation analysis, regression, and also the assumption checking. I think we went over that a little bit in the data analysis that we were doing up top. So yeah, we're using t-test and ANOVA to compare those means, and then exploring relationships using the Pearson and the Spearman correlations. And so that's a little bit of what we see in these next couple of slides. And so for the comparative analysis, we're specifically using t-tests in this case to determine if there's a statistically significant difference between the averages of those 2 groups. And so it's useful to understand the respondents from one question and how they differ from another group from a separate question. So looking at like question 10 and seeing how the responses differ if your Likert scale is at a low, and a response for question 10, whether you agree that it should be used more in classrooms, is a yes or a no. And so depending on whether it was a yes or no, it'll do an analysis on whether there are significant or non-significant differences between those 2 questions. So it's grouping 2 questions and kind of doing the analysis for them there.
And here's the questions we can see significant difference in, which is, for example, question 1, which is how familiar you are with AI, and by question 2, which is have you used AI. We can see that the difference between are significant, which means that most likely if you answer that you're very familiar with AI, you most likely used it in your educational experience. And same for other questions which are mentioned here.
And that's kind of the trend that we saw. But here on the bottom right hand, what we have is the output, right? This is what we received from our code. And then very similar situation here. Using the p-value, if it's less than 5%, we'll identify it as significant. If it's greater than or equal to 5, it'll be categorized as not significant, right? And so that's what these questions 8 by question 2. So that would have been, do you feel that AI could widen the gap between students with different levels of technological literacy. And then question 2 being how frequently, if you've used it,
have you used AI,
if you used AI at all. And so it indicates that there's not a significant difference regarding the concern about AI widening the gap in the technological gap. Sorry.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, just a little bit what we described on those insights. There are some significant relationships, and we also found a couple of non-significant relationships, such as question 8.
Yeah,
really
because like how you use AI doesn't affect that how you feel about the gap between students with different levels of technological literacy. So yeah. For correlation analysis, it helps us to explore the relationship between different survey questions by using Pearson and Spearman correlation, which we mentioned before. And Pearson correlation measured the strengths and direction of linear relationship between two variables. A value closer to 1 or -1 indicates a stronger relationship, while a value near 1 suggests little or no linear relationship. Whereas the Spearman correlation measures the strengths and direction of a monotonic rank-based relationship between two variables used for ordinal data or non-linear relationships. Whereas the p-value we discussed before about how strong they are.
Yeah, the correlation between them. Yeah. And so this is what that output looked like. And this is where we still, taking a look at the p-value, made a decision whether there were significant correlations or non-significant correlations between their data. And I think here there are a couple of good examples of significant correlations. Yeah. Looking at like question 4, between question 5, 8, and 9.
Yeah, which is question 4 is to what extent do you agree that AI enhances personalized learning experience? And question 5 is, do you believe AI tools can improve academic performance? So like pretty similar questions. That's why they.
Yeah, which would explain
together.
that, if you agree that 1 is high, then you would agree that the next question would also be high. So that makes sense. Coming over to reliability testing, like we talked about, we're using Cronbach's Alpha, and it helps us assess the internal consistency of our survey items. Values above 0.7 are generally considered acceptable for reliability, and anything between 6 and 7 are considered questionable but can still be acceptable depending on the context. And as for us being the survey, I think we have a little bit more wiggle room with a survey and not a whole lot of responses, right? We didn't get over 100 or 200 or so, yeah. And anything below 0.6 indicates poor reliability. And so for us, here is kind of that code of what that looks like in our Python notebook and how we're using this analysis and how we're evaluating Cronbach's Alpha. But in our survey questions, we received a score of 0.603, which indicates that questions demonstrated a moderate level of internal consistency, which is promising for assessing these perspectives.
Yeah, so, and only like with that much answers.
Yeah, and so it's encouraging. Of course, there's room for improvement, but it's kind of where we are. Yeah. And looking at thematic analysis is how we did the qualitative method used to identify or interpret patterns or themes. And so what we do is we apply some coding, do theme development, and then the frequency analysis on those themes. So using theme development, we do the analysis for that specifically. And it helps us uncover the deeper insights and patterns that participants have in the perspectives of AI in education. And so we use question 6 for that thematic analysis because it is the open-ended question. And so you can see the spread of answers. The majority were other, of course. And we can kind of see how that is spread out in different categories for personalized learning, time efficiency, and then other has all those different words that we can see included there.
Yeah. I think we can skip that part.
So, yeah, I think here what we want to call out is the theme prominence. of course, the column that we saw used most was other, but with all the different words that we found there, we were able to essentially group them to personalized learning, time efficiency, and learning assistance. And that clears up a little bit more when we do our word cloud. You'll start to see a little bit more of how much each of those responses were used, or how much what the frequency was for each word. But for here, the overall pattern is obviously it's a positive, specifically for increasing the learning experience, being more efficient with time, and learning assistance as well. But yeah, many shared positive themes. So we talked a little about word clouds and sentiment analysis. We use that to tell whether it's positive, negative, or neutral. And here's the word cloud.
Yeah, here's the word cloud where where the larger words are, the more frequently you can see them and responses on this open-ended question number 6, which is what are the main advantages of using AI. So we can see that help, time, and learning AI are like the most faced answers there, which makes sense because AI helps sometimes give you answer quicker than you can trying to search it somewhere.
Yeah, especially for like students, right?
Yeah.
So
as well as learning, here's like pretty good representation of what we got.
I really like seeing this like in this format. And then for sentiment analysis, we use our survey, right, to conduct that analysis, and we're splitting it between positive, negative, and neutral. And so what we're doing is we're giving essentially each response a weight, and you can kind of see that here. And depending on that analysis and the score, it will, or the sentiment score, it will decide whether it's positive, negative, or neutral. And here is where we can see that sentiment category. There are a few mistakes, right, where you see a lot of 0.0000, and it could be because of the question length. We could have maybe made it a specific requirement to be just a couple of words. So there's room for improvement there, but I think it did a really good job at reading over these manually and seeing, okay, it is positive, it is negative, it is a neutral response. I think it did a pretty good job at capturing the overall sentiment for AI use. So, yeah, I mean, for as far as results, this analysis of the survey data provided really good insights into the participants' perceptions of AI and technologies in education. I mean, as we all see just now, the responses are positive, right? Yeah. We're seeing it is positive. We want to see more AI, and we are using it as students to conduct our education and studies. But what I'll dive more into from here is the descriptive statistics showed the average levels of familiarity and agreement, and inferential statistics explore the relationships between differences of participation groups, and then also the thematic and content analysis help give us the sentiments and common concerns of the different topics that we found on this open-ended question. But in general, this resulted in a positive outlook towards AI in education, specifically on assistance and learning support through diverse opinions and its impacts are present. Again, there is room for improvement, and more research can be done that'll benefit refining the survey questions to improve the reliability of like our sentiment scores and regression analysis.
And for future work and discussion, we plan to expand our research by exploring additional relationship, by adding more data, making people do this survey more and more, and we can expand it like that, and also suggest to conduct qualitative interviews to further explore participants' experience with AI in education to better understand the reasons behind the survey responses. Furthermore, we aim to refine our sentiment analysis approach by utilizing more sophisticated natural language processing models that can capture subtle nuances in responses. And here's an example of references we used.
Yeah, of course the references we didn't all add in here because of just the length of the PowerPoint. That would have been incredibly long. So just to note, we're turning in our PowerPoint presentation, we're turning in our Word document, and we're also turning in the code that we used for creating each of these graphs or the data analysis that we had. So you'll be seeing that. And we hope you found our research interesting.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time. We had a lot of fun doing this, and we think there's a lot of value in AI in education. So thank you.
Thank you.